Good afternoon. Still gorgeous out there. Welcome to Dice and Bolts, where I take a look at the core dice mechanics behind a lot of the role-playing games on my shelves. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the mechanisms behind hefty Faith, the sci-fi RPG from the sadly now defunct Burning Games. You can probably still buy it from their web store, but they're not putting anything else out. I was lucky to get the starter box set of this. And then I kickstarted Garden in Hell, which is the first expansion, and this hardcover version of it. And it is a beautiful, beautiful book. I would say that's from the start of the book to probably 4/5 of the way through. That's all setting, and it's full color, and the artwork is beyond belief. Very, very different. Very, very different system on this one, in that instead of dice, you have a deck of cards. These are custom printed cards. You can use normal playing cards, but they're not that expensive. And again, these add to the tone of it. The artwork on the cards is taken from the book all the way through, and it is beautiful. And effectively, it's a standard deck of cards with a couple of jokers. There are 4 suits of cards. You've got Tech, Urban, Wilderness, and Space, and the cards are numbered 1 to 12, so same as a standard deck of cards, and there's a pair of jokers in every deck. They changed the way that jokers work for the full, because this is officially the rules version 2.0, which is the official rules. Everything up until then was technically sort of playtest. Where are my notes? I did have a page of notes for this. There we go. So how does it play? Not the dice and bolts, the cards and bolts. Dice and bolts. The dice and bolts of the game. Every character has a hand of these cards. You have your own individual deck. Nice and simple. And you would have 6 or 7 of these cards. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 if you're a human. And you have this, and that's a resource. You know what cards that you've got. When you declare an action, if the action is confronted, as in if it's not just a yes, you do it, if there's any doubt, it's what's called a confrontation. Now, you start off working out any advantages and disadvantages that you've got. These are narrative elements. You then work out what stat and skill that you're using. Your stat is a number from 1 to 3. Okay, and stats are very, very difficult to increase later on during the game, and generally speaking, you're looking at 1s and 2s for most things. You may have a 3, but you very rarely have multiple 3s. The stat is the number of cards that you can play related to that stat in any combat round. So say, for example, dexterity determines shooting people, but it also determines dodging. So if you've got a dex of 3, you can only play 3 dex-based cards in any confrontations across the whole round of combat. So you may only want to choose to play 1 or 2 when you're attacking to save 1 to dodge with a little bit later on. The GM would then determine if it's either a static difficulty or if he's going to actively confront you, which is where the GM is drawing cards as well. You have a skill, which normally goes from 0 to 5. Rarely you can get 6s or 7s in skills. That's the base value, so your action total. So if you've got 5 in firearms and 2 dexterity, then you're going to get to play 2 cards, and effectively you take it in turns to play your cards. Now, I've got a fairly good hand here. I've got a pair of 13s there. So if I know that the target that I'm shooting at has got a defensive value of 20, and I'm starting off with 5, I know I need to beat that 20. That's how it plays. So I can say, right, well, I'll play 2 cards. We need 15, so I'll play my 8 and 7. Actually, no, that won't do it. 9 and 7, I've beaten that 20. Quite straightforward. You've got a an incremental increase. So if I beat it by 5, I've got a decisive hit. If I beat it by 10, then I've got a critical hit. So I could say, well, I've got 5, I want to beat 20, so I want to get a total of 30. So I can play, there we go. No, just highball it. Pair of 13s. Nice and simple. You're gonna hit that one. But then again, you've stripped out those 13s, which means that I've got no high cards. So if I've only got one card left, and I've just spent my powerful assets for it. So you've got like a resource management element to the game as well. There are also the suits of the cards that you've got. You play to your affinity. So every character has one affinity that they're particularly good at, and that allows you to draw cards back into your hand. You can also what's called play to the environment, which is where if you are, say, dealing with space combat and you play a card that matches the environment, that again triggers a mechanical benefit. Sometimes that can be look at the top 2 cards of your draw deck and put them in, keep one and then discard the other one. Sometimes it's just drawing an extra card for it. And you only really redraw your cards when you've got a narrative break. I think it's like the D&D equivalent of a long rest. So you kind of need to marshal what you use here and there, because if you've got no cards, then you can't play. The other thing is if an action is actively confronted, then the GM will normally start with a base of 0, but the GM will have a certain number of cards that they will play from their deck, and then you take it in turns. So it'll be a question of, right, okay, so the players normally play first, so it's a case of, okay, well, I've got 5 in my firearms, I'll play an 8. The GM says, well, there's a 10. I want a good hit on this one, there's a 10. The GM says, there's a 13. The GM has a hand of cards, and what I did when I was running the game is that some games would be like a blind draw, when I just draw from the top of my deck rather than actively opposing the characters. The other big difference is that with the version 1 rules, all of the jokers went into the GM's deck. The GM could play a joker to negate the player's previously played cards. So if you want to specifically stick the spanner in the works, you just joker a card away, and that card doesn't count to the total, but it still counts as a card that's being played. Version 2 of the rules, the jokers, when you get them in your hand, because the jokers also go in the GM's, in the players' decks as well, you can play a joker at any time to increase or decrease the quality of a draw, of a confrontation. So if I'm confronting against you and I get a standard hit, then you can play a joker to drop it down to a miss. You're attacking a space wolf vampire thing. The monsters in this game are really quite strange. And you get a decisive hit, you can play a joker to turn it into a critical hit. So you've got that. It gives you a little bit of player agency to decide when you want those boosted hits for it. 2 jokers in every deck. There's nothing to stop you from playing 2 jokers on one card, so you can turn a standard hit into a critical straight away, and then save your good cards as well. Anyhow, that's the Dice and Bolts of the Faith role-playing game from Burning Games. I would say roll well, but trust in the heart of the cards on this one, and I will see you around.